Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Costume Co. And Happy New Year to everyone because this is the first live stream that I'm doing for 2023. And today I'm so delighted to have my special guest, Lindsey Kear. She's here with us. She has taken the time out of her evening to spend with us. And so, welcome, Lindsey. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to get a little bit more into sort of the discussion, like getting into the costume business. But before we do that, I just want to welcome everyone who's coming in. Say hello if you're in the chat. Make Lindsey feel welcome because it's the first time she's done a live stream, so I want to make her feel really welcome and comfortable. So hi, Carl and Lindsey. Can you see those comments now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So Lindsey, actually, she's going to tell us a little bit about herself before we get going. It's better for you to tell everyone and then rather than me. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Lindsey?
Sure. As Heidi mentioned, my name is Lindsey Kear. I've been working in costumes for about 15 years. I'm a costume designer. I've worked in almost every single position within the costume department. And this past year, I started my own business called The Costume Consultant, which helps people get into the business as well as industry professionals navigate different problems they might have or career challenges.
That's great. I made you solo there. I hope that didn't freak you out.
I
have the power. I have the power. So anyways, we have some lovely people coming in. So we've got Carl's here. Hi, Carl.
Hi,
Carl is a regular. Brenda shared at this stream. I really appreciate it. We got Max. Is that a friend of yours?
We shared a discovery call. So
wonderful. Okay.
Yes.
And Ryan's here. We got lots of people. Hi, Lindsey from Jody.
Yeah.
Cool gamer. Hello. Hi, Lindsey. So everyone's being really welcoming. I really appreciate guys.
Dylan, okay. He was our costume PA on the last movie that I did in Cincinnati.
Oh, amazing. Thanks so much for coming, Dylan. Awesome. So, okay. I threw this at Lindsey before we started the stream, but this morning, bright and early, the Oscar nominations came out. And, I don't know about you, Lindsey, but I don't tend to watch too many award shows. What about yourself? How do you feel about awards season?
I don't necessarily watch the shows, but I am first to Google the results or the nominations. And it's just so wonderful because these are my peers, a lot of them, and it's wonderful to see people celebrated. So it's a very exciting time.
Absolutely. And I mean, you tend to do a lot of TV, so Emmys must be a big time for your team and everyone that you work with.
Emmys, yes. And then, Austin Butler was just nominated today, and I just worked with him on a movie called The Bike Riders. So
that's right. You told me that. So that's amazing. And speaking of Elvis, or the movie that he was nominated for, that's one of the movies that's been nominated for costumes. Did you look at which films were nominated for costume? And
that's the first thing I go for.
Yeah. And what did you think? What were your thoughts? I've only seen one movie. Isn't that terrible?
There's time. There's still time. I think I've seen all of them. So nothing was a big surprise except for, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That was just, Shirley, the costume designer. I had worked with her a long time ago as an assistant on a commercial. She's been around in the styling world for a really long time, and she just killed it about that movie, and especially it being a lower budget film. There's a lot of hard work that went into it. So it was so wonderful to see that she got nominated.
That's the film that I saw. And I immediately, as soon as I saw the film, and I got to see it in the theater, which was a real treat because, a lot of people weren't getting to see films in theaters. So I got to see it. And as soon as I came home, that was the first thing I did. I did a shout out about the costumes because I thought they were just brilliant.
Yeah. And I mean, even as far as the way they shot it and the continuity of it all, it really was so intimidating, and especially for somebody that does this every day for their job, to watch how they did it and accomplished it. At the end, she's falling down the flight of stairs and she has a costume change in the middle of falling down the stairs. And it's was that even in the script? How do you even figure that out? How do you track the time jumping that they do back and forth, just from a costume standpoint, let alone the script and the sets and everything. So it was definitely a big job, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that it got recognized. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And our Sarah Pally, who is Canada's own sweetheart, she got nominated for her movie. Got nominated, so we were really excited for her. And also, we had Canada had an animated movie nominated. So I'm
Wonderful.
always like, woohoo, Canada!
Yeah.
Okay, so enough of that. Me tooting for or rooting for Canada. All right. Well, anyway, I was going to tell everyone in the chat. So Lindsay's going to be, we have some questions and we're just going to go through them. She's going to tell us about, if you want to get into costuming, it's not just even if you're already working in costuming in any department, doesn't have to be costume design. We're going to go through that. But what I was going to tell everybody, if you have questions for Lindsay as we go along, I'll keep track and we can either stop the questions we had and I can try and get her to answer some of your questions. And then the second little thing that I want to mention, and we'll do this at the end, Lindsay has generously offered a half hour, 30-minute session, a consultation with her. And the idea about it is we'll do it by trivia, but if you're interested in going into costuming or you're already in costuming and you want to take it further, this would be for you. So if you're not really interested in costuming as a career or going into it, maybe don't enter it because then you'll take a spot from somebody who might actually genuinely be interested. Okay, guys? When I have live streams, I oftentimes do little giveaways and stuff. So you could just wait for
Yeah.
another time, like a little
I just
goodie.
want to point out, Dad, don't answer the questions.
Oh, is your dad here? Where is he?
He's under Tim Roberts.
Oh, that's your dad. Okay, where is he here? I'm going to find him. I love that your dad came in. Oh,
Yeah.
here he is. Hi, Dad. Thanks so much for supporting your daughter. That's awesome. Okay, so let's get going. I promised Lindsay this would be a fun, exciting, and positive experience. So we're going to start off. All right, so Lindsay, tell us a little bit about yourself. But let's start off with how did you get into the costume business?
Sure. So I started, well, way before I even started working. I used to get all my cousins together at the holidays and dress them up at family gatherings and put on shows and torture everybody. I didn't have any fancy costumes. It was really like digging in my parents' closets and my brother's closets and mine and making everybody try on crazy outfits. It wasn't until I graduated college and I started temping at um, fashion houses that I would prep all the fashion weeks and they would bring in stylists to put the looks together. And I just got really inspired by those people. And I couldn't believe that that was an actual job that you could get paid for. And so I started styling on the side on my sick days and time off work for my corporate job. And I started going to FIT. They had a styling program when I was living in New York City. And then I always wanted to move to California. So I decided one day, I was like, well, now or never. I didn't own anything living in New York City apartment. So I put everything in like 2 boxes and I shipped it out there. And I was like, I'm just going to try to figure out how to get into the movie business. And so I found anybody that would talk to me, any type of like email address I could find. There wasn't Facebook or Instagram or any type of resource like that. And I believe I found somebody on MySpace, and this one person met me for coffee. And, when I first moved to LA, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. I didn't have an apartment. And within 2 weeks, I had all the things. And I literally have been nonstop ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. That's quite a turnaround
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Yeah.
So tying into a little bit to this. So before working as a costume designer, you sort of mentioned a little bit about this. What other jobs in costuming did you do? And did this inform your work as a costume designer? Because I know you mentioned you've done
Sure.
almost all departments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in order to be a good leader, it really helps to understand what the other roles are within the department, just to be able to understand the type of support they need, speak the same language, some of the challenges they might have, or also to be able to, set your teammates up for success. And so I started off as a costume PA, which is a production assistant. And I was a production assistant for about 2 years. And during that time, I really networked as much as possible. Anybody that would, pay attention or give me their email address. I would always follow up. I would literally like stalk people in the costume rental houses, or I would go to any type of panel. And so I really worked hard at networking while I was a costume PA, because a lot of people had told me that once I joined the costume union, that if I don't know that many people, then I'm going to have quite a difficult time to get work. So I kind of, met as many people as possible. And I eventually got into the union, and I started off dressing background. Um, I also did some shopping, and then I ended up shopping for many, many years. And shopping is like, I did a lot of contemporary shows. So I literally would go to the mall and shop for all different characters head to toe. So I would, get direction from the costume designer or the assistant costume designer. I would read the script. And, it's really all about trying to figure out where that character would shop. Would they shop, at the Goodwill or H&M, or do they have a little bit more money? What type of job do they have? Do they have any type of like quirks, or, are they really into accessories? And so when you're shopping, you really want to do a well-rounded job and bring as many options back as possible. So then the costume designer and the assistant designer can do their fittings with the actor. And so how I did shopping was I would always get everything that the costume designer wanted on the list. And then I also would try to, add a wild card in there too, that maybe wasn't on the list, but I thought that was interesting. And I loved being a shopper because I was always out in the world. I always got to see what was new and what was trending. Um,
You're kind of independent, like you're an independent business person too. You don't have to be, because you can have lunch when you want.
yeah.
You can sort of thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Self-employed.
Now you do. It's all about time management, and
That's true.
especially working in Los Angeles, it's all about the traffic. And so timing out all the different places that you have to go, and especially if you're under deadlines, like say if the fitting is later in the afternoon and you only have a certain amount of time that you can go out, you never want to be late bringing the clothes back for the fitting. You always want to be back with enough time that they can thoroughly go through what you shopped. So I shopped a lot. I also worked in a lot of different mediums. So I did TV, commercials, movies, print. And when I was doing commercials, that's really where I got the experience of a lot of different positions, because it's a smaller team. So when I worked on commercials, I shopped, I did all the fittings, I was on set taking care of the actors, and then I also would do the budget and do the paperwork at the end. So I really got a handle on many different roles. And then also with commercials or low budget films, if you don't have an aging and dye team, which means people that, distress the clothes, make them look a certain way, over dye them, make them look older, break them in. If you don't have a team or anybody on your team that has that job, then you become the ager and dyer and distresser. So I learned a little bit about everything. And then eventually I moved into assisting, and I've been assisting for almost a decade, assisting costume designer. And then I have designed some low budget indies. And most recently, I was the associate designer on She-Hulk and also the Bike Riders.
Yeah, and you also worked on one of my favorite shows, which is oh no, I've lost it in my brain. Oh my God. Hold on, let me get it. Sorry. Altered Carbon. I love that show. Now you worked on the pilot, I think, right? And
I did, no, I didn't do the pilot, but I did the
oh,
rest of
okay.
the season.
You did. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like I think I probably mentioned to you I'm a huge sci-fi person.
Yeah.
So that's why I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that's sort of like my wheelhouse sort of thing. So
Mhm.
great show.
Yeah, Altered Carbon actually was the first show that I got to travel extensively on. So we shot up in Vancouver. And so I was up in Vancouver for about 7 months.
Well, it's funny because when we were watching it, I'm like, this looks like BC.
Mhm.
You can kind of tell from the mountains. A lot of times they do, or some movies I'm like, that's Alberta. I know Alberta.
Yes, yes. And then I did Skyscraper with The Rock almost right after that.
Oh yeah, okay, cool.
We shot that in Vancouver, and it was supposed to be Hong Kong. So it was really interesting. Like we would be doing exteriors and it would be Vancouver and then they would pan up and it would be like the skyscrapers from Hong Kong. And it's like
Wow.
Vancouver, half Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I was going to just ask you before we move on to the questions. So, and because you and I were talking about this earlier when we first met, was that, people get confused, like what's the difference between like contemporary versus historical versus, sci-fi genre. I don't even know how you describe it. How do you describe those differences?
So it all depends, right? Like, contemporary is present day. So, a lot of those shows, we do mostly shop, um, at the mall or at, rental houses or online, different types of vendors. And it's basically anything people would wear present day. And then historical or period pieces usually take place during a certain decade. Um, Now, with period pieces, we do try to get it as close as possible, but there's a lot of movie magic that goes along with that. A lot of times we try to rent or use as many period pieces as possible, but different things like sizing, people wear different sizes during different periods. Um, a lot of the garments might have not made it this long, so we can't use them, or so we have to recreate them. Trying to find period correct fabric can sometimes be a challenge. Sometimes then we recreate the fabric to look like it's period fabric. Um, and then also there's a lot of costume rental houses all over the world, but in Los Angeles, there's quite a few that you can go and you can rent things or use things as inspiration and recreate them. But then also, what people wore every day back then doesn't necessarily look great on camera. So sometimes, a lot of times, it's not always period accurate. And sometimes it might be a mistake, or a lot of times it is intentional, just based on how things look good, um, or the type of sets, or budget constraints, or whatnot. Sci-fi is
Mhm.
usually, we usually make it up, to be honest. They might be influenced by all different factors, like if they live on certain planets, if they need breathing apparatuses, or if they've had to adapt for any other reasons. Um, you know, if they just stuff like that. So a lot of with sci-fi, if it's like so Altered Carbon, for example, there was a lot of
And was that based on a book?
yes. Yes.
Okay, so all right.
So it is sci-fi and they do take place on certain planets, but it's everyday people, right? And there's different groups or hierarchy within that planet and amongst the people. So um, they're different based on their classes. So they might be like one group of people might be a certain color palette. Another group of people, like we had some, businessmen, if they had collars, we folded them under. We did different like knots. We just did
I
like,
noticed that.
yeah, yeah.
And also, I think the wealthy were more like in whites and creams and lighter shades, if I recall. And then because they were technically, I'm thinking back, but they were like when James Purefoy was in the
Mhm.
first season, right? So
Yes.
they were up in a higher level, if I recall, above all the
Yeah.
pollution. Mhm.
Yes. So they lived in the clouds.
The
So
clouds, yes.
their palette was a lot more airy and light.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah,
That's a
sci-fi.
great explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So if it's like because some people have talked about this, if it's like 2020, is
mhm.
that then historical or do you still consider that contemporary? Like if it's like
So it's really interesting. It's kind of we're all experiencing it. Fast fashion has kind of blurred the lines across the board for
Mhm.
most of the 2000s, right? Like, um, we can't really tell the difference anymore that distinctly. Where, like, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was these elements that we really could be like, oh, that was the 70s, or that was the 80s, or even like the early 80s versus the late 80s. There's different things now with the 2000s, like fast fashion, that things are turning over so quickly. Um, there's not really a chunk of time that anybody is getting attached to styles. So it's really hard to even tell what 2020 what well 2020 was most of us was pajamas, right? Or like
Mhm.
on the waist.
Totally.
So um
Relaxing, like track pants. I think I bought my first
right,
pair of track pants I'd
right.
ever worn.
So coming out of 2020 was really
Sorry.
difficult for shows and shoppers because, we were starting to come back. I think I started in September 2020 after having almost 7 months off. And I was prepping She-Hulk, and it's a lawyer show. And so we had to find suits, but no one was wearing suits because no one was going back to the office. So it was a really big challenge to find those
Mhm.
out there in the world because they just weren't making it. A lot of it was like athleisure wear.
By the way, I love that in She-Hulk, there's sort of like I call it kind of the equivalent to a, Edna Mode character, who makes all the super suits and
Oh, yeah.
everything. I thought that was really awesome.
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
talking about Edna Mode the other day, and someone didn't know who I was talking about. I'm like, "Oh." I said, "No capes."
Right, right. Well, do you know who Edna Mode is based off of?
I think it's Edith
Yes.
Head.
Yes.
Okay, we agree on that.
Yes, yes,
Awesome.
yes, yes.
I did a little
And do
video
people
on
know
it.
who Edith Head is?
Yes, exactly, and she had those little glasses. Anyway,
Mhm.
I did a video. I'm like, "Okay, these could be some possible who I think Enna Mode is," but in the end, my hypothesis was it was that. So some people disagreed with me, but I am so glad we agree on that.
Amongst the costume world, we all believe it is based on
Okay, awesome.
Edith Head.
So and actually the actor who plays who was the designer, he's also in another great show, but The Flight Attendant.
Attendant. Yes.
Amazing actor. Yeah,
Yes.
I love him.
Yeah.
So all right, so let's talk a little bit about the costume consultant business. Like, okay, so we had a really great chat about this. Why don't you kind of tell everyone how you decided to get into this business and how it's sort of like, I know you have a little bit of flexible time between, working on a show or a series. So why don't you tell everybody about that a bit?
Sure. So, like, for about the past 5 years, well, I've been traveling mostly for 6 years for work. It's called working on location. And I have, transitioned more into doing TV, even though I have been doing movies peppered in there. But TV, I'm usually gone from like 8 to 10 months a year. And then I usually take a couple months off, put my life back together, go to all the doctor's appointments, and then my phone starts ringing again to pack my bags and go somewhere else. For the last like 4 or 5 years, I really have been feeling like a calling towards something else. And I never really was sure about what that was because I never had like the brain capacity or space to like really think about what else I would want to do because I've been so immersed in the costume world for so long. Like this was it. Like I had no other option. So I really took some time off at the beginning of last year, and I worked with a life coach, and I was very intentional about taking the time, and kind of recovering from my last job, and just doing a deep dive into like what's important to me, what brings me joy, what am I passionate about. So I started volunteering at the local food bank. I started fostering dogs. I just started doing things that really fed my soul. And I realized that I really wanted to help people. And it was a very generalized thought. Um, and I was like, how can I help people but still be in the same business? So I'm not like completely, going off track and starting completely over. So working with my life coach, we came up with the costume consultant. I would meditate every morning, just thinking, okay, how can I help people? How can I help people? And one day it was like somebody spoke to me and they literally said the costume consultant. And it just kind of
And it's alliteration. Like you've got some alliteration there, like Costume Co. You got the
yeah,
costume consultant. We got the two C's, right?
yes, yes. So, when I got the idea, it just kind of all fell into place. And I realized I really wanted to be able to give the support to my coworkers and colleagues that really needed it. So many of us just work so hard, so many hours, and there isn't a lot of training in our industry other than on the job training. And a lot of it is very intense, high pressure. You learn by making mistakes all the time. And so I thought, well, how can I help people in other situations that they're not put on the spot like that, that they can actually be intentional with like what they're doing. If they want to move into a different role and they've, never done that before, no one ever teaches us, like, how do you go from a shopper to an assistant designer? Or how do you go from working as a set costumer to a shopper or to being a key costumer? So I now provide, the support and the knowledge, because I have done most of those positions, that people can sign up with me and really think about their career and what they want to do and how they want to go about it, what they want the next 5 years to look like. I also wanted to help people get into the industry, because the person that I met with and that helped me, really, really set me on my way. And so I have always met people that have found me on the internet for coffee. I've always taken the time to meet with them and really pay it forward. And now, because I've been traveling so much, I can't really do that anymore. So again, that's another part of the business, is that I meet with new people that have never worked in costumes before. And I make them sign up for a 3 1-hour class. And it's a deep dive into costumes. We talk about all the different roles within the department, what union is, what that even means, how do you get into the union, what are the benefits of being a union member, the different types of places that you need to work to be able to be in the industry, if they want to relocate. Also, if you want to work on location, I've worked at this point so many different places, so I can give advice on how to get housing or the different neighborhoods to live in. Also, the crew when you go to a new place and you have to hire local people. I can recommend people now because I've worked in Atlanta, Hong Kong, Australia, Hawaii, Vancouver. I've worked a little bit in Texas, and New Mexico.
You've never worked in Georgia? I thought all the productions were done down in Georgia. Every time I watch a show, it's Georgia.
So, and now Georgia. I avoided Georgia. I don't know why. I avoided Georgia for almost my entire career. So, and after the pandemic, I was like, you know what? Georgia's looking great right now. I can go to Georgia and rent a house and, have space. And that's what I did. So now checked Atlanta off the box.
Yay. Okay, 2 things before we move on to the next question. One is we are doing a giveaway at the end, and it's going to be for a 30-minute consultation with Lindsey. So we'll be doing a little, I'll do a little trivia question at the end. The second thing, sorry, 3 things. If you have a question for Lindsey, please put it in the chat and I'll get her to answer it. There is a question coming in from someone who I'm suspecting might be a family member of yours.
My mom.
So Beth, is it your mom?
Yes.
I just love that your whole family is here. My family never comes. My sister does. Yeah, my sister does. It makes me nervous anyway. Like I get a bit nervous if they come in.
I usually don't tell them about any of this stuff until after the fact, and then they're like, "Why didn't you tell me?" My brother was like, "You gave me a 21-minute heads up," and I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds about right."
So, and anyways, well, what you can do after this airs, you can just send the link out to everybody. Go, here, family, watch this. But my sister comes in sometimes and I'm okay with that, but anyone else, I probably would get really nervous. So your mom asks, what has been your most technically challenging costume to design? That's a great question, actually.
Thanks, Mom. I think on She-Hulk, I worked with Anne Foley. She was the head costume designer. We did something that we've never done before. So She-Hulk is a real person. The Hulk, as far as CGI goes, the Hulk, he has always had like a uniformed costume. I don't know if anybody has ever realized this, but when he hulks out, he has helmet hair and he usually is in a tank top or like tight shorts. His clothes don't really move. They're kind of like stickered on him. With She-Hulk, she's a lawyer and she is like out in the world amongst like normal people, regular sized people. She's a woman and she has flowy hair. And So there was a lot of elements that we had to figure out how they moved and how did we capture the movement in her character. So like when she moves in her suits, how do you get like the rumples within her suit, like her suit jacket or her shirt, her hair, how does it flow when she's walking? So we had a woman Malia, who was 6'5", and we dressed her in the costumes that She-Hulk was going to be created as a CGI character. So anything She-Hulk was computer generated as, we had in real life on Malia. And we also had to figure out the right proportions. And Anne has always really been really intentional and specific of not sexualizing women, especially when they're superheroes. So, it being She-Hulk, we wanted to make sure that her clothes didn't expose her in a way that would be distracting from the job at hand that she was in. She hulks out in the courtroom in the opening scene. And so we just had to, and also with Marvel and with that show, we never really knew what She-Hulk was going to be, how tall she was going to be, what size she was going to be, really until the show came out. So,
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah.
I think I saw Tatiana's like Hulk double. I thought there was a picture I saw with her and her Hulk.
Yes, they
She
posted a lot on social media together.
Oh, on social media, because Tatiana's what, like she's maybe 5'5" or something?
If that.
If that, and then how tall was the Hulk? The She-Hulk?
Well, so Malia was 6'5", but I think the
Mm.
Hulk at the end of the day was 6'7". So we would put Malia in heels and then when Tatiana was She-Hulk, they would put her up on risers. So then at least they had the eye line. They knew where to look.
Ah, okay. Excellent. Yeah. Guys, let me know in the chat if any of you watched She-Hulk. Jack and I watched it. Like we pretty much binged it as soon as it came out. And same with Alter Carbon. And season 2. But you didn't work on season 2 though.
I did not work on season 2.
It wasn't as good. So not that you want that show to do. Yeah. But also it didn't have Joel in it. Come on.
Right.
Joel was in Alter Carbon.
Right. Well, I mean, that show, because of the premise of that show, you really could use anybody.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I know, but I just love Joel Kinnaman though. He's so dashing, right? And handsome.
Yes.
Okay. So Jody asked a great question. How many years have you worked in the costume field? I think you sort of touched on that a little bit at the beginning.
Yes. A little over 15 years.
Yeah.
And then working in production, like production costume.
Production, but before that, you were saying you were doing family plays, and then you were doing some
styling, and then I also worked at Ralph Lauren and Coach. I worked more in fabric and textiles.
Oh, you worked at Coach, so you'd be like a Sex and the City character then when you were working there. Is that a glamorous job to be? Is that like working at Vogue, where there's a room with shoes and stuff like that? You can go in and
the sample sales were wonderful. I'll say that. The sample sales were wonderful. But we were required by HR that we could only carry Coach handbags. So
well, that's a terrible thing to have.
I do not like being limited. And it never happened to me, but they would catch you walking into the building in the morning. Security would stop you if you did not have a Coach.
Wow. No, I was just thinking if Carrie in Sex and the City, she got a job at Vogue and they had a shoe room that she could go and borrow the shoes and stuff. So it was so funny. So Max, do you know Max, right?
Yes.
Max says, yes, I've done so much research about the path to becoming a CD and there is nothing. This is such an awesome thing you're doing. I absolutely agree.
Yes.
I was telling Lindsay my own story. Like when I didn't know how to get into film. I was a theater person. And one of the things her and we were talking about before was that there's this perceived barrier to getting into film and TV in the costume arena. And it was only until I found someone who I knew said, hey, Heidi, you want to come and work on this set with me? And all of the things you were mentioning, about you're learning by making mistakes. I did all that. Mm-hmm. I did so many blunders.
Yeah.
The only advice anybody ever gave me was don't ever hold up camera.
Oh, that's very good advice.
That was good advice. And don't trip on the tracks. That was the other thing. I was always terrified of that.
Yes, that's also, yes, you go down and you're the only person. Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no, another Joel. There's a Joel in The Last of Us as well, yes.
Right.
Deborah
Um,
has really loved Altered Carbon, by the way.
right. I do want to can we stick with what you had mentioned in regards to trying to find out information, like Max was saying, like trying to find out information.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
the feedback that I've been getting from so many people is that it just seems like it's a secret society. It's not intentional. It really is what I've experienced in talking to my peers. We're just really busy, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but we're so busy. Our hours on set, we're working. We work between 12 and 16, and sometimes even more hours a day, and we have such limited time, and in our free time. So the last thing that we really are interested in doing is talking about what we do with other people during our time off, because our time off is so valuable, especially when we're on a job. If you catch one of us in between jobs, then I think we're much more inclined to talk about it and to share information. It's kind of like, giving birth. You don't really remember how painful it was. So, like, you're more like, yeah, like, sure, it's great, it's wonderful, even though it was really, really hard. Um, so I'm trying to create a more direct path and give people more access to the industry, and also just connecting people. I've always connected people um, together throughout my whole career. People always ask me, do you know any shoppers? Do you know any supervisors? Are you available? Or, so I've always been able to put good people in touch with people. And also, we are kind of hesitant sometimes to work with new people because we are just afraid of how it's going to go, because we never know, how much training people have, or how much experience. And we literally hire people based on word of mouth. So there's no really like job board other than there is Facebook, and a lot of people do use Facebook to post things in real time. But I personally do not do that. I really rely on my network first and foremost. So, meeting people and working with them within my program, it's also allowing them to get a certain type of credibility when they do go out into the work field. I'm connecting them with people that I know already, and those people trust me, in my opinion. So it's already kind of like a vetting process that they get along with, the information that I'm giving them. So I can't believe that 15 years later, people are still Googling how to get a costume job. They literally are. And there's still no information out there on how to get it except with the costume consultant.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, they're going to be dragging us back into some of the shows you worked on, but
Okay.
how do you spell your name? Siniscamillo. Siniscamillo, welcome. Wants to know if you had to research the comic books to see what she wore before on the printed page.
Um,
That's a good question.
yeah, sure. So Marvel, they have a lot of illustrators on their team. And we work with illustrators to create a lot of the characters because these characters are already established, going back decades. And there's all different versions of these characters, right? Based on whatever comic it is. So the costume illustrators, they tend to have like this like amazing knowledge in their own brain, and they are such big fans of the Marvel um, comic book world. So a lot of times the illustrators will create those specific characters, and then it's the costume design team responsibility to bring them to life. So if that makes sense. But there's many, many reiterations of what those superheroes look like until we get to the point where they're on camera.
Lee has a great question. Hello from Savannah. Lee, are you a female? I think you're a female, but like, you can tell me. What is the difference between an assistant costume designer and an associate costume designer? That's a great question.
That is a great question. Not a lot of people ask me this. So
You're the
okay,
perfect person to answer it.
it is. Okay. So assistant costume designer is basically what it is. You assist the costume designer in all the creative fields. There's a lot of different job tasks. If you go to my Instagram, I have a great post that describes a lot of the tasks that the assistant costume designer does. Um, Associate costume designer. It is basically the same thing. It is just a slightly better credit. It is not a credit that is recognized by the union, but it is a credit that it's for somebody that has been assisting for a really long time. They're trying to bump up to costume designer. And so for me, I just didn't want to keep collecting assistant costume designer credits. I'm really trying to bump up. I'm trying to get bigger projects as the head costume designer. So producers, when they look at my resume, if they see associate costume designer rather than assistant, might be more inclined to give me a job. And it just is basically saying that like I'm in this in between space trying to just get somebody to take a chance on me.
Now, sometimes I notice there's co-costume
Mhm.
designers.
So
Now, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
so co-costume designers means that you split it equally. So they it, for whatever reasons there are costume design teams like Kurt and Bart, where they are co-costume designers. They split the credit. They figure out, whether it's a split of the salary or however they figure that out. But basically, they're looked at as equals in the costume designer role, where the associate designer is still technically the assistant, but they're an overqualified assistant, if that makes sense.
Yes, it totally does. So here's another one. Is the costume designer, this is a great question, a female dominated landscape? What is the percentage of males in the field? I think that's a great question,
That is a great
actually.
question. And
Mhm.
to be honest with you, this has been an issue that another issue that we're trying to push forward right now is pay equity, because our union in our guild is predominantly female and minorities. So we are the most underpaid role within um, the creative team on a production. And we're really trying to change that and get pay equity. So I would say in my career, to be honest with you, I've maybe worked with one or maybe two male costume designers. I've worked with mostly females, but on the team, it's a mixed bag. Um, it's men, female, uh, non-binary, everybody. We work with everybody, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, so and it's funny because like I'm looking back in history, oftentimes you would see in the old days they would have a men's person, a men's wardrobe person, and a female wardrobe person. I always thought that was interesting. Like Edith Head would do the women's
Right.
clothing, for instance, as we were talking about Edith Head. So I always thought that was really interesting how times have changed there.
Yeah.
This is a good question from Actual Life. Is there any particular costume based on an adaptation that you'd love to design?
Mhm.
Any from genres you've worked on like sci-fi and cyberpunk?
So the movie that I just did was called The Bike Riders, and that one was really awesome. Aaron Bennick was the costume designer, and Christina Rybar was the assistant, and I was the associate. It was 1960s motorcycle riders. So it was basically the start of motorcycle gangs in Chicago, based on a book by Danny Lyons. It's a photo book. And those guys, they all wore like different denim vests, and each person would customize their vest. So like different patches and different like flair and chains and just throughout their life of different things they've collected. And so that movie was really cool because we literally had to customize hundreds and hundreds of motorcycle denim vests and leather jackets. And there's a lot of
Wow.
arts and crafts and uh,
Yeah. Did
we
the
had
main
photos.
did the main cast like did you have them involved in their flair and the decorate like
Some of them
certain
had
things that they
opinions.
might have been like I'd really feel like I should have that on my vest kind of thing?
Yeah, some of them had opinions, and then sometimes their opinions would change halfway through, and we're like, "Nope, we've already been established. This is what you look like. And,
Yeah.
maybe up, it's
But I didn't like all these studs. I decided to put on my,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But I
That's
mean,
it.
yes, it's always a conversation. It's always a
Uh,
collaborative conversation for sure. And then Dylan, who's in here, he helped us in our aging and dyeing department. So he got to mess it all up. Like all of the costumes, every day it's just like more dirt, more mud, more
mhm.
everything. So
Dylan has a question here, actually. Is it recommended to join the union in a
mm.
sorry, is it recommended to join the union in a right to work state? I'm not sure what that means because you guys are
So
in the
sure.
US.
So in the US, there are certain states that are considered a right to work state. So Georgia is one of them. I'm not able to explain everything what that means, but basically, union wise in Georgia, anybody can go to the union office and say, I want to work. Can you put me on the list? Um, in Los Angeles, it's not a right to work state. So the union has its own rules and regulations and what you need to be able to join the union. It's a lot more difficult to join in Los Angeles. I understand that Georgia is getting a little bit more strict in regards to what they're requiring to do to join, but there is at least a path here.
Yeah, and also if you if somebody decides to do Lindsay's like
Mhm,
costume consultant I think it's 3-hour program,
mhm.
then they'll learn all these in
Yes,
more detail, right?
yes, yes.
Sorry, you probably can explain that better than I did.
Yeah, Dylan
I
knows he just needs to sign up. Yeah.
exactly, just need okay. By the way, I have all of Lindsay's links in the description below. So if you guys want to check her out after, do you all? This is great. Do you always need an agent to be a CD for bigger shows?
No, you don't need an agent. Most people do have agents. Agents are able to get you into the room. They usually have their finger on the pulse of the projects that are coming up, and they also have really established relationships with producers. A lot of times, producers will call certain agents and be like, okay, who's the best costume designer for this? So it does really help to have an agent. It also sometimes it's helpful to have one to do your negotiations. I love negotiating my own jobs. So, but sometimes you don't want to deal with it, and your agent will handle all of the logistics and the business side of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and then, one of the things I was gonna say is that I notice a lot of times a costume designer will get with a particular director, like, I'm just thinking, Guillermo del Toro or something
Mhm.
like that, or, like Tim Burton,
Mhm.
they'll get with one particular director and they'll just work with them on repeat projects, right? Do
Yeah, so like Guillermo, he works with Danny Glicker or
Mhm.
Louis Sequeira,
Louis,
and
yeah.
yeah, and then Tim Burton loves Colleen Atwood.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
yeah.
In fact, she's working on Wednesday,
Mhm.
which was amazing. So, in that case, then does the director just say, "Oh, you're gonna do this job with me," or do you still have to go through all the usual protocols that you would have
Yeah,
to do?
so, a lot of times the director has their own relationship with the costume designer. So, but the director isn't the one that has to, like, go through the nitty-gritty details, right? The director is, like, tells their line producer or their UPM, "Hire this person," and then they have to call the costume designer's agent, and then they have to battle it out. So it
Okay.
leaves actually the creative types out of it.
Okay, great, yeah. Here's another question. This one's from Leah. Do you find it important to have strong drawing and sewing skills? That's a really great question. We were talking about that, weren't
Yes.
we?
No, you don't have to have either of those. It's helpful, especially when you're first starting out and you're working on lower budget projects or student films, to be able to do all of the things yourself. But on larger projects that I work on, and especially when they're union, we have people in specific positions that do those jobs. So the illustrators do the drawing, and the sewers or the cutter fitters, they do all of that as well. And it's a classification within the union for both of those. So the illustrators are in the Costume Designers Guild 892 in Los Angeles, and the stitchers um, and uh,
Cutters.
They're in 705 in Los Angeles, or they're in 479 in Atlanta.
Mhm.
So it's very specific what your role is on a union project.
Yeah, that's one thing that I found that was kind of different going from theater to film. Like the difference is that like I've never worked with a costume designer in theater that does a mood board, but it seems
Mhm.
like pretty much every costume designer I've seen in film and TV does a mood board.
Yes.
So even if they don't draw it, they always have
Yes.
their mood boards. Do you want to explain actually what a mood board is? Do you mind
Sure.
or
So a mood board is basically images or colors or any type of thing that you find inspirational for the character. You create a board for that character. So like, if there's like a movie and say like there's five main characters, you'll do five different boards based on what you think initially that character would look like, or dress like, um, or be interested in. It's just kind of like something that gives you a feeling of that character. And
yeah, and a lot
usually,
of times when I see I see shots of the wardrobe, they're oftentimes around, they're up on the walls, they're as you can refer to them constantly.
yeah, and sometimes it's like pieces of fabric,
Mhm.
or it can be anything. It could be a piece of jewelry. Just when I worked at Ralph Lauren, he had walls of mood
Wait
boards.
a second, you worked at Ralph Lauren as well? So now you're not just from, Sex and the City, you're from Friends.
Yes, 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 yes. He had walls of mood boards, and
Mhm.
and then that's how he would decide which way the collection was going to go, because he would have all different things like themes, and then he would narrow it down to like one theme, and that's what the collection was about.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's a cool story, by the way. We'll have to talk more to you about that later. Jasmine says, "Is it hard to?" Oh, this is we talked about this a bit
Mhm.
before, but is it hard to break into costuming without formal sewing and fashion training? I am a self-taught and have a background in design, but I lack the experience of technical sewing and pattern making.
Right.
Yeah, because we were talking about all the different departments you can
Yeah.
work in, right?
You can do anything. You can come from anywhere. You can do anything. You can have a GED. You can have not a GED. Literally, you don't need any type of training. All of our training happens on the job. But again, it's always very helpful to have training and schooling and to be able to have those conversations, especially if you are a designer, um, or if you are going to be doing shows that have that you're going to be building costumes and understand construction and draping. But I've learned a lot of technical stuff on the job and just working with my teammates.
Yeah, actually, well, I was telling Lindsay that I did a bit of time on set, and that's what I did. I worked on set, and so sometimes there'd be a situation where we have to just tack up someone's cuffs or something on the fly, like right on set. And
Yes.
so having a little bit of hand
Basic,
sewing
yes. Basic
is really helpful.
is yes,
But not mandatory if you're working in another department, but if you're on
correct.
set, you kinda have to have your tape on you and your little kit
Yes.
with you,
On
right?
set, you need a little bit of everything, meaning like, you need to learn how to age and dye, do blood work, because a lot of times if people get shot or if they get into a fight, then you're responsible for applying like wet and fresh dirt, blood, any type of sweat, any type of thing like that.
I have a cat says this is just a comment. She says, "I am a set costumer in New Mexico, and I don't have any sewing or fashion training." There you go.
Yes.
Um, oh, here, this is a great question for your mom. Besides your attention to detail type of personality, what other traits do you possess that has helped you to be a
Mhm.
success? And I mean, this is a great question because, like, what kind of
Yeah.
traits do you need to be to work in costuming?
So, Heidi, you and
I
I have
love the support from mom, by the way.
I know.
Mom, big
Um,
thumbs up from you.
yeah. So, I'm ever evolving and ever changing as a human being and in my career. Sometimes my mother, to bring this up, says, "Who are you and what happened?" And in a very gentle and loving, supportive way. Because Heidi and I have talked about this. I'm in recovery of being an introvert, shy person. So I have had to really work at that. I've worked on doing icebreakers, or so many times I'd be in a room and feel like I didn't belong, and I didn't have anything to contribute to that conversation until I realized that I wouldn't be at that table if my opinion didn't matter. So when that kind of switched for me, I learned that if I don't start speaking up and if I don't start sharing my opinion, then it's a really missed opportunity. Um, I also have tried to um, sometimes people in in group settings, like we work with hundreds of new people all the time. I'm meeting new people every day. I used to wait until people spoke to me first because I was too shy or I didn't think that they would know who I was. And it was always that person that stepped forward first to introduce themselves that would put myself at such ease. So I realized that if I can turn around and start being that for other people, not only would that be really great practice for me, but if I could, make somebody else feel included or seen, acknowledged, or, and acknowledge that they're part of the team and they belong there. And I've been really working at, I work at that every day.
As this stream is going on, more and more people are piling in, and we're getting a lot of questions. So,
We're gonna run
Lindsay,
out
we're
of
going to have
time.
you back. So maybe we'll go to a few more questions, and
Yeah,
then we're just going to have Lindsay back. How do you feel about coming back?
sure,
Mm.
no problem. I'm ready.
Are you finding this fun?
Yeah, it is fun.
Okay.
I'm just ignoring that everybody's here and we're just having a conversation together.
Yeah, no, everyone's really supportive. This is a fun question. So, Cat Yellow Ranger wants to know, how many costumes do you make for the main actors and stunt doubles? That's a
Okay.
very great question.
Yes, it all depends.
Mhm.
Depends on your budget. It depends on what the stunt is. I've been on so many shows where it's like, "Oh, we're not gonna have a stunt double." And I'm like, "Well, who's gonna be falling on their face?" Like, of course we're gonna have a stunt double. Are they getting dirty? Are they getting bloody? Is it getting ripped? Are they gonna be in a harness? Are they both gonna be in the harness, the actor and the stunt double? Or are they just gonna put the stunt double in the harness? If they say they're gonna put the stunt double in the harness, they're lying. They're gonna put the actor in the harness too. So, it's all about the budget, what you can afford. If the costumes have to be aged, it's all about the timing too. So, do you have time to do multiples? On Skyscraper, I think between The Rock, his photo double and his stunt double, they had 80 shirts of the same shirt in different variations of blood and dirt and whatnot. And then we had like 100 pants. And so in all
Wow.
fairness, aging,
Now, can I ask you a question? Did he ever rip his pants? Did he
uh,
ever, like just in the, like in the, oh, you're
like not
probably
on
not allowed to
purpose,
tell me that.
not on purpose.
Well, just like through the strain of his
He's
rockness
aging.
and being very physical.
I don't know. I don't know because usually his step costumer would take care of him.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. So,
yeah,
all right. I just ask these ridiculous questions
sure.
sometimes. This is a good question too. Any tips for breaking into specialty costume like armor and more sci-fi fantasy works? Are specialty costumers in high demand? Like Game of Thrones, or House of the Dragon. She might
Yes,
want to work on that.
they are, but they are, and there's so many specialties. But I would hate to say like that is like the niche to go for because I still think that people need to understand how the department works. So I always tell everybody they need to start as a costume PA. Always. And once you get into that and you start meeting people and you start getting people start trusting you and see that you're talented and you can do a little thing like you start being able to do some of your specialty stuff and um, then it becomes more niche. But it's a little trickier to go after like a very specific thing. But hey, it happens for sure. But it also
Mhm.
limits you because, if you're working in a place that you don't get many shows a year and they don't focus heavily on specialty shows, then you're not going to be able to work. So
Mhm.
just,
So maybe you want to diversify a little bit then beyond
yes.
that. I want to get to this question because I think it's a really interesting and important one. Deborah Blanc asks, ever seen an individual with a service dog working in the profession? And actually just any disability, for instance.
Yeah.
Um,
This is tricky. Um, I support everybody. I think there's a space for everybody. I don't necessarily think that everybody feels that way. Um, I have seen service dogs for sure in the office. Um, it is very tricky being on set with a service animal just because there's so many elements that are uncontrollable. And sound is a really important element while you're shooting. It's hundreds of people in one very small, close space of working. Um, so I have heard of it on set, but I don't know if it's kind of like a tale that's been told. But I would say in the office for sure.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing too. A lot of people don't know that there are people who just do the administrative aspect of
Yes.
set, right? Or of costumes, I should
Yes.
say. So there's lots of different roles
Yes.
that can be done. Um, so, there was another question I wanted to get here. Well, Jasmine, I wanted to highlight this one because I know a lot of people who are like amateur
Mm.
cosplay. They do small contracts for people. They oftentimes aspire, and I think sometimes that could be a good skill set to have. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good skill set to have. Like, for example, on the reshoots of She-Hulk, we had a set costumer who she's one of the bigger set costumers in Atlanta. And I found out after the fact that she is a cosplayer. And she builds all of her own costumes and stuff like that. I didn't even know that she did that because she's on set all the time. And it's just something that she also can do. But that's kind of like the beautiful thing about costumers that they're like, there's so many, just being creative types, there's so many things that we can do. We just don't always have the opportunity to do them.
Mhm. Like, even when I was working in theater and so on, a lot of times there'd be people who were like amazing embroidery artists, like on their side. They do quilting, they do all kinds of, arts and craft type things. And then they bring it in one day. You're like, oh my God, you did that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yes,
it's just,
and
I was,
Instagram is such like
yeah.
a beautiful thing to be able to see people display their art and stuff. And I know a
Mhm.
lot of customers that are really into Comic-Con, um, and so they love doing it. And I think specialty is a beautiful thing that it's such a talent. But I think just diversifying your skill set is really the best way to go.
Devil's advocate, which is a funny name considering this question. How much nepotism revolving door is involved in this profession? When you said directors tend to keep the same ones around, brings up red flags for me. I didn't mean it in that way. Maybe, Lindsay, maybe you can explain a bit about
Sure.
that.
Um, yeah, I think and I hate like even, getting into this to a certain extent about diversification with the crews and stuff like that. Cause I've always tried to hire people that are best for the job, regardless of all their background. But the tricky thing is that how are people supposed to get experience? Um, and to be able to get certain jobs if they don't have some favoritism or, it's usually like, oh, my niece needs a job, like can she come be our costume PA? And then 3 shows later she's the costume designer. It happens all the time. um but i really I really try not to focus on that. I really am about trying to give as many people an opportunity as possible. But it happens all the time, and there's a really big push right now in diversifying crews. A lot of jobs, there's a lot of mixed feelings about it on all sides. I think personally, the pendulum has been in a certain space for so long, it's been swung the other way, and people are getting certain opportunities that they've been looked over and passed on. And, um, you know, I'm not going to get caught up I try not to get caught up in any of it. I try to just do my job, meet as many people as possible, and keep moving forward.
I'm going to say something really controversial, and you don't have to respond. But one thing I noticed is that costume designers never retire. Is this like a thing? Like like most businesses, they seem to like, like 65, maybe 75. Okay, I'm done. I'm going to
Oh,
go
I mean,
retire.
like,
No,
there's designers
they
that
go
are
into
in
their
the 80s,
90s.
in the
What is
80s and
going on
90s.
there?
They don't wanna they get bored. I mean,
They get bored. Yeah,
they
they don't
get
want to stay at
bored
home.
because this industry is so tied into, like, our identity that,
Yeah.
like, when we're not doing this, we don't know who we are, and honestly, that's why I had to hit pause, and I needed to figure out, like, what else made me happy because I really I wanted to have hobbies. And when people would ask me, like, what do you enjoy when you're not working? And I'm like, I stare at the wall. I don't know. Like, I don't do much when I'm not working. And I wanted to change that. So, but I know for my fellow colleagues and stuff like that, it's just so wrapped up into their identity. They don't know how to stop.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, I mean, it's kind of like it's like presidents, you know. It's like I'm 80, I'm going to become the president. Okay, what? Sure. I'm saying this from somebody who has a very young, youthful prime minister
Right.
here. I won't mention any names, but Leah has so many great questions. If you know someone in the industry, how do you reach out to them about possible jobs without
Mm,
feeling like a nuisance? This
yeah.
is so funny. It's like you guys were like in the conversation with Lindsay that I
Mm.
had with her before we did this live stream. Yeah,
You guys
so
are
we
all
had a
getting
chat
this
about
for
this.
free. I'm telling you.
Yes,
So,
you're getting all this free advice.
um, I always say that, like, if the people, there's so many terms for this, but I always hire people that are the first last person in my mind, like, if that makes sense. So if, like I mentioned earlier, people will be like, oh, do you know a shopper? And earlier that day, a friend of mine might text me and be like, hey, my job just fell through. I'm looking to work if you know anything. Then when that person asks me, oh, do you know a shopper? I'm like, oh, this person. It's just the person that was literally the last person in my mind. I'm not thinking like, oh, but what about this person? What about this person? So same thing with networking. I tell people just to follow up, whether it's every couple weeks, once a month, but you have to be relentless. You have to, because otherwise you're
Mhm.
not going to get anywhere. I was relentless. There was no chance I was failing when I first started on this mission. No chance. So,
Well, and one of the things Lindsay and I were chatting about is, and I noticed that people do this, and this, because I'm of a certain age,
mhm.
that we don't recommend that you hit them up on Instagram, right? We don't recommend that you leave a comment under, "Hey, I'd love to work for you."
Correct. And well, I'll leave it at this. This is going to be my quiz tomorrow. If any of you
Mm.
follow me on Instagram, I do quizzes every
Oh,
Wednesday.
that's so fun! I
So
love it.
it will be in the quiz tomorrow at the costume consultant. So
Okay, great.
you'll find there the best way to communicate with people that you're trying to network with.
Okay, we're gonna finish off with one more comment. Sir, I am so sorry, guys. We weren't able to get to all your wonderful questions. I didn't even get to finish all of my questions. So we'll have to have Lindsay back if she is willing to come back, because what I've noticed is not only are people asking questions about going into the costume business, they just kind of have an interest in things that happen behind the scenes. They want to and great questions, right?
Yes, and this is why I started the costume consultant,
Yeah.
to give you guys access to this. So,
Yeah.
we'll go into that after this.
So this is a fun question. Any great perks? Free clothes, free tailoring, invites to galas. By the way, I love your outfit, she
Oh, thank
says.
you. Thank you. Yes and no. So tailoring, yes. I alter most of my clothing. Not myself, but when I'm on a show or whatnot, sometimes if there is a slow moment and they don't mind, I always ask for permission first. Um, I do get things altered. Um, Free clothes, not so much. I'm not actor size. And I also, it's very character driven. So it's just because it's a certain character doesn't mean that it's the character of Lindsay. Have I gotten free things throughout the years? Yes. But am I looking for, was it anything that I was like really excited or I couldn't afford myself? No. Um, Getting to invited things, yes. We do get invited sometimes to premieres. A lot of times we're on other shows by that time. So it's very hit or miss if we can go to the premiere. Um, and galas or anything, not necessarily. Like, I'm a member of the Television Academy, so I can go to the Emmys. But I still have to purchase tickets and um, you know, but I do have access to certain things for a price.
Um, also travel though. Travel,
Yes,
I mean, some of that gets paid for, I'm assuming. It gets covered.
all of it gets paid
Yeah.
for.
So there's that's a wonderful perk.
Yes, I've traveled many,
Yeah.
many places.
Maybe some nice hotel suites
Yeah,
occasionally.
Yes,
Some
yes.
beautiful
Commercials. Commercials are the way
accommodations.
to go for, nice accommodations. Yeah.
Commercials, yes, they pay very well, don't they?
Yes, yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, guys, I am so sorry. Like, I don't want to keep Lindsay too long because she has to do her trivia for Wednesday
Yes, yes. So go to the costume
on
consultant
Instagram.
on
And speaking of, she's
Instagram.
on Instagram. You have actually under the costume consultant and also under your own name, but I put
Yes,
the
and
links in
then,
the, yeah.
my personal slash, like, movie life, Instagram is LK Styles. So both of them are interesting and different in different
Mhm.
ways.
And I
But
want to thank Carl, by the way. He always keeps the chat very lively. He says he teases me about being Canadian, that I drink maple syrup to keep myself youthful.
it's working. It's working.
Oh, thanks.
Um,
Um,
yes, and then I also just want to say, if anybody wants to continue the conversation, just sign up for a discovery call. My website is thecostumeconsultant.com, or go to the Instagram and you can book a discovery call that way too.
and Carl's is welcoming, and
Oh,
the goodbye committee. He's saying thank you to Lindsay and mom and dad. I know, isn't that lovely? But before we
I think my grandparents are here too. They just
Oh
don't know.
my gosh, that's awesome. But before we leave, okay, so we're going to do a 30-minute consultation giveaway by Lindsay. What's the best is maybe we'll have it that they'll contact you if they win, and
Yes.
what's the best way to do that?
Well, are we going to find the winner right now?
Yeah, we'll do it right now.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question, and then whoever gets. So, guys, as I was mentioning earlier, don't enter this if you have no interest in going into costuming, like Carl. I know you don't. Um, don't enter this. Only if you have an interest in it and learning more from Lindsay. Like, she's going to spend a dedicated half hour with you, so it's very cool that for her to do that. And then from there, if you decide, yes, this is something I really want to go into, then you can explore going into her course after that. Okay. So the question is, this is the question. It's really easy. What Marvel TV show was Lindsay the associate costume designer on? She's mentioned it a few times throughout the stream, and it's actually when did it air? Oh, Leah got it already. Leah, I didn't even do the hint. Great job, Leah. Okay. Oh no, did Allison get it first, actually? Can you guys tell me, was it Allison? It might have been Allison. Carl, can you tell me which person answered first? Was it Allison or Leah?
Well, they both came in at the same time.
They did. Carl, are you there? Maybe Carl can help me with this. Guys, it was so tight. I have them both at 9/11, but on my end it shows that it was Allison. So I think we should give it to Allison. But Leah, if you still are interested in signing up with Lindsay, everything is in the chat, and I highly recommend you guys do, because I actually recently did a consultation, and I thought it was really worth it. It was for my YouTube channel, and I think it'll be a wonderful experience because I never had anything like that. I never had anything, and I wish I did. And we would even go like, what do you get paid? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, we
Like,
didn't even talk about
what's
any
the
of that.
hourly rate? Like, like, how do I didn't know anything, right? And you go to set and they go, here, fill out this thing. And I'm like, what is this? It's a tax form. I don't know anything about this stuff,
I think in America we have to sign up for health insurance. I've helped
Yeah.
people watch
Like,
people
when
for health
do you
insurance.
have to bring your own food? Do they give you food? Like, I didn't know any of it. So, I mean, that stuff the food thing is always a big one for me, because I want to know, is there going to be food? And do I need to bring food? Because if I don't, I'm hypoglycemic. I need my food. So when I got to set and I discovered there was food,
Yes.
because in theater, I was telling my husband the other day that in theater, all we have is a coffee fund, and you have to pay that weekly. Otherwise, you don't get any coffee. That's all you get
Yes,
in
yes. And
theater.
then one thing I would like to say is that we do work really long hours, and it's okay to be upfront and ask about how long the days are, but do not ask to go home. That's
Oh gosh,
the
no.
real
No.
thing with the young ones.
No, no.
I go home now, and it's
And
just
also you don't want to go home because then you get to pay those the big bucks.
I never wanted to go home when I
No,
was
me neither.
now I'm like the first one out the door, but before I was always the first one there and the last one to leave. So
That's awesome. Philo. Do you guys use that term? For first in, last out?
oh no.
It's a theater term. I don't know where it comes from, but I always thought it was a really good one, Philo. So anyway, so what I'm going to ask is that our lucky winner, which was Allison Hamilton, I believe. Allison, would you mind contacting Lindsey? Like her info is in the description below, and I'll trust that you will reach out to her and that hopefully you can arrange it. But if you have any issues, I'm always on Twitter. You can always message me on Twitter. So anyway, what we're going to do is, well, first of all, I have something else planned with Lindsey, so that's coming up in hopefully the next month or so. But also we'll have her back on a live stream, hopefully, and we can maybe just do an Ask Me Anything or something might be good. Have you ever done an Ask Me Anything?
Yeah.
It's the hot new thing.
I do that during my hours of consulting. So.
Yeah, it's a hot new thing. I mean, within reason, of course. I'm not going to let them ask you. I might have to do some editing, but because with this crowd. But anyway, and I want to thank everyone who came in tonight to watch. We're going to be doing more live streams. This is like the first one of 2023. I was supposed to do Lindsey, we were doing a House of the Dragon. Every week we were following that because we're all a bunch of nerds. And at the end of the season, we were supposed to do this great big thing, and we never did it. So I might still do that. So just to let everybody know, because I know Natural, you're here. Oh, hey, Tony. Hey, how's it going? Tony's one of my YouTube friends.
Nice.
And but anyway, so Lindsey, did you want to say anything else before we wrap up here?
I don't.
Where people can find you and.
Yeah, like I said, on Instagram, it's The Costume Consultant. My website is thecostumeconsultant.com, and you can book I do a free discovery call, and we can chat about what you're looking to do, and then we can go from there. And but follow my Instagram account. I share a lot of information there about the costume department and different roles within the costume department. And you just can't really find that information anywhere else. So check it out.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on as my guest. Actually, because it's funny because Lindsey and I just met like I think like not even a week ago or something. So we're like fast friends here. So I'm really looking forward to doing future things with you. And anyway, so you guys, I hope you all have a great evening. Thanks so much for attending. If you're joining us late and you're like, hey, I wanted to know more about this discussion, it will be available on the rewatch. You can go back and watch it. Or you can reach out to Lindsey if you have a question, about her course. Okay, so thanks so much. Thanks for Lindsey's mom and dad for coming in.
One thing. Yes. I am teaching a class this Saturday called the Side Hustle Think Tank. It's for costume related people. You can sign up at my Instagram too. It's about costume people that have started a side business. They saw a need, they wanted to fill it, and they've started a business. And so it's all about how to start a business. And if you've had ideas and you just don't know where to start or how to make it happen, I'm interviewing 2 amazing women that have started their own business as well. So it's going to be a Q&A with them, as well as just kind of like a think tank to throw ideas around. So
no, yeah, you were telling me about that. I was telling my husband about that one about the the mom business, like the baby supplies, which I thought was so clever. Not because my husband does events, right? And he often has to travel and carrying all this stuff. So like if you're a parent, like working mom, it's such a great idea.
Yes. So, my other friend, she started an all-inclusive skin tone and size lingerie company called Naked Rebellion. So
Carla's giving you a hashtag side hustle think tank.
There you go.
Thanks, Carl.
A really inspirational, hour or so conversation, a safe space to be able to share information and there's just anything you've ever thought of and you just don't know where to start. We're going to talk about it.
Wonderful. Okay. So I think that's everything then, right? And hopefully, and actually guys, just a little Tony's here, but I'm probably going to be doing a this is The Last of Us. The Last of Us. That's it. The Last of Us. I don't know if you're watching that show, Lindsey, about zombies.
There's a lot of content.
Yeah, exactly. So we're probably going to be doing a live stream about that. There's really not, there's costumes in it. It's contemporary, but no, actually there's some historical costumes in it too, because it's 2 timelines. And that's another thing, right? When you're dealing with multiple timelines.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tony. So thanks everyone again, and have a wonderful evening from Canada. Lindsay's in the States, but I'm from Canada. Okay, bye
Thanks.
everybody. Take care now.